Okay. Right. Well, let's pretend none of that happened whatsoever. Hello. Welcome. I'm Catherine Croft, and I'm the Director of 20th Century Society. And it's an enormous pleasure to invite Paul Catherall to come and talk to us tonight. Paul is an artist, and we featured his work in our 20th Century magazine back in the beginning of 2019. He works mainly with linocuts, and I interviewed him. It was incredibly interesting to meet him and to see more of his work. We're going to put that article actually up on the website so that both members and non-members can have a look at it online if you're interested after doing the after hearing tonight's talk. But basically, Paul is from Coventry. We have got a lot of casework in Coventry at the moment. I mean, Coventry is a fantastic post-war city, and soon to be city of culture. But we've had enormous struggles trying to convince the local planning authority and local councillors that that they have an absolutely outstanding and unique heritage of 20th century buildings. It's both a celebration, I think, tonight of Paul's work and also of Coventry, a town that he and we are equally enthusiastic about. Paul, do you want to go? Are we going to talk about the bag thing at the end?
About the what? Sorry, about bad thing.
About the bag.
Yes, we'll talk about the bag at the end. Yes, if that's okay. Yeah, why not? Yeah. I'm ready to go now, I believe. Yes. So, can you present from Coventry on your screen?
Absolutely.
That's all right then. So it's all working.
Yeah.
Right. So thank you very much for that, Catherine. I shall fire away and witter on. Everybody forgive me for any stalling or pauses or unprofessionalism, because this is the first time of a Zoom lecture, and I've only ever done a Zoom thing about twice before with friends. So please forgive me. I'm going to start now. So, oh dear, here we go. This is exactly what I was talking about. Okay, so yes, for those who who know me, then I'm an artist who works mainly in linocuts, and architecture is my favourite subject matter. I was due to have a Coventry themed exhibition this May at Eames Fine Art Gallery, and due to the pandemic it got postponed, and it's now happening next spring. As Catherine mentioned, I was from Coventry. I wasn't born there. I was born in Lichfield, but moved there at age 2. And I lived there until I was age 14. So it's a very specific time that I was living there. More or less my home, my own, all my schooling. So kind of very formative years. And the place kind of subconsciously has informed my linocuts over the years. And it's definitely ingrained a love of modernism and brutalist architecture. And I used to kind of, people used to ask me when I did blog posts and things like that about my prints, where did this love of modernism and brutalism come from? And I think I just slowly realised it came from my upbringing in Coventry. Even though I didn't go around at the age of 13 and 14, scratching my chin and admiring modernism and brutalism, I just think it kind of got subsumed into me. And so I used to always mention in these things, I've got to do a set of Coventry prints, And then when I found out it was going to be the year of culture in 2021, I thought, well, this is it. I've got to do it now. It's about time. So what we're going to do tonight is we're going to kind of take a meandering walk through the city as if we're on a day trip, and we're going to stop off at various post-war gems that the city's got to offer, or had to offer, because some have gone already, or at least one has, but we'll kind of come to that throughout the chat. And I've also got a few directly inspired London prints as well, because the theme of the show that I was going to have, called Sent from Coventry, was Coventry prints, but it was also focusing on some of the prints that it's inspired and how that came about. So the talk's going to be illustrated with some of my finished prints, my studies, drawings and reference photos for upcoming prints and other bits and pieces, and basically me rambling on. So it's kind of see it as a bit of a work in progress tour. And yes, basically I was going to do a real manic period of printmaking just before May and finish all these prints I had ready for the show, and lockdown put pay to that. So it's a bit of a sketchy show at the moment. But I thought a good place to start for a day trip is the Modernist Station that I think was finished in 1962. And this is a painted colour visual of it. I think it's just really beautifully simple and elegant, just a really iconic piece of modernism. And with many of the subject matter of my prints tonight, it's under threat from development. Although it's listed, it's due to have a massive kind of redevelopment, and I think there's going to be like a gigantic multi-storey car park that's going to completely dwarf the whole station. And I'm not sure if they're getting rid of the entrance that I've got here, which is a really lovely concrete slab that runs at right angles to the rail tracks. Because to be honest, I couldn't actually make head and tail of the visuals, but whatever it was, it didn't look great. So yeah, tonight, obviously, as you could probably tell, I'm not an architectural expert, but I'm going to touch on it now and again when I know some odds and ends, but I'm going to concentrate on the kind of artwork and the inspiration as well. I usually start, when I produce a print, I usually start with line drawings, taken mainly from photos, or if I've got the luxury of time, I'll sit there and draw. And then when I'm happy with these drawings, I'll do a little colour visual. And this is really just a tool to help me produce the print. So it's almost like doing a colour by numbers. I just use it as part of the print process. It's only recently that I've kind of started to actually like the little painted visuals, because I never have them viewed as finished pieces. They just definitely works in progress. Right. On to the next slide. This is so this is a small test lino cut of the station. And again, if I've got the luxury of time, that's what I'll do. I'll do a small lino, and I can work out how the colours overlay. I can work out the colours behaving, and basically just kind of get rid of all the things that aren't working when I do the finished print. And sometimes, you know, the good thing about doing these is sometimes elements that you think are really vital in a print, you realise that you probably don't need them. And sometimes you need to add things, and sometimes with printmaking you get happy accidents, and that's the beauty of printmaking. You can kind of get something, you didn't intend it, but you can actually, if it works, you can use it when you do the finished piece. Right, the next image is the finished article. So this print is entitled Cov Station. Cov, as people who are young when they're in Coventry call it. Yeah, and so as you can see, the little red signage, the no entry sign, and I think there was a red car or a little section of a bus that's gone, because I just thought it was too distracting, and it kind of distracted from the real sleek modernism of the station. It's kind of ironic as well, because I think from the plans that are afoot, the car park that is absolutely, looks absolutely gigantic, is in a real vibrant red, which just seems completely at odds with Coventry and the station. But anyway, back to the print. I was trying to give Coventry a bit of Americana glamour with this print. I mean, people who saw it, who don't know the building, which is more or less everyone who saw the print really, because they don't know the building, they thought it was somewhere in America, or thought it was a gas station in Miami or California. But funnily enough, when I took reference for this image, the sky was virtually that colour, and that's exactly how it seemed to me. Obviously it's been pared back and simplified, but this is pretty much how I saw it. A little side note to the station. The interior has got some really attractive wood panelling and discreet kind of modernist signage. on the platforms, and I really hope that they keep those during the redevelopment. But this photo is from a reference visit I did in 2018, and so not that long ago. And I was just peering out the window and noticed all these posters that were from the 80s with Roland, I don't know if you can see Roland Rat and Kenny Everett there, which is a bizarre thing to see because they're so old. I thought it was some kind of art installation, and I even tweeted about it. But the next visit I was gone. I went, they were gone. So just a little bit of interest there. Right. So we're leaving the station and we're going on a little meander, kind of over and under the ring roads towards the centre, towards the Ballyard. The route hasn't changed much since my teenage years, and it's something I've always remembered. It's always kind of struck me as quite a nice entrance into a city or a town centre. Because most times if you go to a city and you go to a railway station, around it, it's always pretty seedy and grimy or dirty and busy. Whereas from Coventry, it was a little bit away, but it's quite an attractive route through with landscape gardens, albeit next to ring roads. But I always thought it was quite a nice, soft entrance into a city. Yeah, so this image is of a corner of the Ballyard, and I actually chose this image as my favourite 20th Century Society detail when we did a thing on Instagram and social media. I just love the real vibrant blue lettering that's just really discreet and succinct. I just love the way it sits against the raw concrete. It's like a flash of blue against this grey. So yeah, this forms part of the Ballyard, and I've got a lot of emotional involvement with this space. It's quite nostalgic for me, and hopefully you could see its merits, but it just kind of needs a bit of tender love and care. Well, that's what I think anyway. And right next to it, there's a George Wagstaff Phoenix sculpture. It's very much an image that's stuck with me. It's something really hopeful and youthful about the sculpture. Obviously, it's to do with the city rising from the flames. I'll definitely plan to incorporate this into future print. Probably move it back, a print that incorporates some of the other precinct designed by Donald Gibson, because that's where it was originally sited. It moved, I think the sculpture moved in 97, but it's kind of weird because I always thought it was in the Ballyard. I always associated with the Ballyard, but 98 was 5 years after I left. But there you go. Right. So here's the kind of initial sketch stages of my planned Ballyard print. I've always loved the composition of John Maidin's Coventry Point, which is the high-rise in the background of this sketch, which is pretty much been demolished now. I don't know what state it's in, but I know the demolition started maybe last year. I think it's pretty much gone. I always used to love them peeking out over the Ballyard wall with my beloved lettering on. And I think it's kind of heartbreaking to think that with the plans that are afoot for the whole redevelopment of this area, that it seems like the whole of the Ballyard's going to go. And I just think it's a real shame that it's going to be replaced with, well, the plans are just some kind of identikit shopping mall, when they've got something really modernist and original that really works. Anyway, enough of my cries of despair again. I'm going to go back to the process. So basically, for a print, I always sketch on tracing paper. I don't know if you can tell this, but that's tracing paper. And I do my initial sketch, and I use tracing paper because it means you can just continually refine your drawing rather than have to redo the whole thing again. So I end up almost with like a flicker pad where I'm just drawing it, and sometimes I can spend an entire day just moving something 5 millimeters and then cropping it another bit, and that's the beauty of tracing paper. And I'll do loads and loads and loads of these until I've got a big pile, until I've got a balanced design. Right, so yes, the next step in the process, as with the Coventry Station print, is a colour visual, which I usually do in gouache paint. yeah, I kind of wanted with this. I wanted to show that gridded linear. It's almost like an austere design with the protruding mullions, I believe they're called in architecture speak. But it's all kind of on a quite a humanist scale, I think. Ballyard. And Otto Solmeris Smith described it on Twitter as a beautifully detailed and really works as a civic space. And I definitely agree with him. And I believe he often has a beer there after work as well. So that just goes to show how it can be used. With this as well, I always wanted to, I still wanted to show a bit of the realism room. So rather than doing it as a kind of gleaming show off as how it was when it was made back in the late 60s or mid 60s, I just wanted to show it as it is now. So it's kind of got that weathering and the thing that all brutalist architecture get with the staining. So I'm trying to catch it now, basically before it's all gone. Right, so on to a little test print, and this image shows the reason for a test print, because it's not half as good as the colour visual, and hopefully the finished print is going to be far better. This is mainly to do with the scale that I've done the print. It's quite small. It's kind of, if you know paper sizes, the image is about a little bit bigger than A4, which doing a linocut's quite small. And so, as you can tell from the very crude lettering, it's really hard to cut something out that scale. But I basically did it just to, again, to work out how the colours overlay and how the textures work and if it's kind of portraying it the right way. So this is in no way a finished piece, but hopefully it's going to turn into a larger print where some of the elements, like I like some of the kind of textured effects I've got with the roller on some of the concrete behind the lettering, that will kind of come to the fore. So watch this space. Another thing that I'd really, rather than this place go, I just love it all to be kind of developed in a sympathetic way and reintroduce the Dome Kiosk, which was like this really, it wasn't, I don't think it was there in my day, but back in the 60s there was like a shop kiosk that had a dome top that stood in front of the square in front of this section, and it just looked like something out of a Jerry Anderson film. It was just fantastic. So yes, reintroduce that, don't demolish it. Right, okay, I'm actually going on my first diversion from Coventry, if you'll allow me. When I moved to London in 1989, after I graduated, I went to Leicester Polytechnic to study illustration, and I moved down to London to, try and live in, dragging my portfolio around. And I slowly realised that I was drawn to places like the Elephant and Castle Shopping Centre and the Southbank and the Barbican. It's kind of like a slow realisation, but I kind of found them homely and familiar. Back then, these places were quite unloved, really, and quite quiet. I mean, back in the late 80s and early 90s on the South Bank, it was pretty dead down there. A bit like Coventry is now, I suppose, to some. But yeah, now areas like the South Bank are being completely re-energised, and it's teeming and bustling with life, which just shows you what it can do. I mean, obviously, it's got the fortune of being on the Thames and having all these wonderful things around it, but it was quiet. Sadly, the poor Elephant and Castle Shopping Centre is doomed, I think, though, because all around it's being developed. The centre itself is still standing, but I don't think for long. But I just love the shopping centre lettering, the standalone lettering. And I'm sure this was inspired by the Precinct Shopping sign on the Ballyard. And this in fact was a recent print that was done to be in conjunction with the Coventry exhibition. Back here is a far earlier print of the entire shopping centre with all the detail removed because of those fiddly bits of lino. This is back from 2003 when I was concentrating on seeing this whole landscape. And in fact, even this has changed now because you used to have a landscaped little traffic island in the foreground, and all that's gone now. Right, so back to the Ballyard, back to Coventry. So we previously, in that print of the Precinct Shopping, we just have to turn left, and you can see the wonderful sculpture by William Mitchell, who sadly died earlier this year, that graces the front of the old 3 Tons pub. And so, yeah, I mean, this you know, amazing sculpture is in danger as well. I mean, I saw on the plans that they thinking of moving it. I mean, how that can be moved, I don't know, but that's another thing. Yeah, it's a place, you know, full of distant memories again. My dad worked in the offices behind here, so we worked in the offices in Shelton Square. Just to the left of this, if my memory serves me right, I think there was the HMV, which where me and my brothers used to buy our first records, and where I bought my first Stiff Little Fingers and Jam records, so it holds a place very dear to my heart. It's where, as little mods, we used to hide from the skinheads hanging around outside. So it's got lots of memories there. Yeah, and the various uses of this space, I think, kind of mirror the change of the city centre's fortunes over the years. So originally it was a modernist pub with, again, standalone lettering for the 3 Tons, really looked beautifully detailed, this on the front. And then it was an Indian restaurant. And now, as John Grindrod stated in his excellent How to Love Brutalism book, it's the world's most avant-garde fried chicken shop. So yeah, imagine having this on the front of a fried chicken shop. If you want to see how it was, if you look on the Coventry Society website, I think it's coventrysociety.org, anyway, but just Google Coventry Society website, and there's a still from an old Jaguar cars advert of it in front of the 3 Tons pub, and it just looks beautiful, and it's so sad to see what's happened to it now. So on to my test print of the wonderful Aztec sculpture. I was partly thinking of doing it in this portrait format because I thought it might work better with a little reflection. But also for the test print, I don't know if anybody knows about lino cutting, but it takes so long. It's so time consuming. It's really labour intensive. So I just thought of the test piece, I'll do it in portrait format, and if I decide to do it in landscape format, I'll save all the carving for the original one. Yeah, and I just really liked the, when I took some reference photos, I just really liked the kind of semi-abstract form you get in the reflection of the windows. Right, so this is onto the large-scale finished landscape print. So I decided to go to landscape after all. And this is pretty large for a lino cut. The paper size on this is over 1 metre wide. And to create the textures and the kind of concrete effect, I used sandpaper on the lino, and I kind of inked it up with thin ink and thick ink in some places, and I overlaid really thin black ink, sometimes where it covered the opaque grey ink and sometimes where it went straight onto the paper. And when this happens, it actually dries lighter when it's overlaying. When it's going straight onto the raw paper, it dries darker, so you get quite a nice effect. Hard to describe virtually like this, but hopefully one day most of you can see the print and I can describe it to you then. Here's a photo of my grubby little hand sandpapering some of that lino, and I suppose there you can kind of get an impression of the scale of the lino. And here's a close-up of it after it was printed, and you kind of get a lot better impression of how the texture comes through the finished piece. Right, so we're leaving my beloved Ballyard and onto through Shelton Square and onto Coventry Market. I've got very fond memories of buying my first pair of burgundy stay-pressed trousers from the market. And every time I've ever been there, it's always been lively and bustling, as any market should be. There's a great photo of the rooftop car park with this lovely clock tower that's now gone. That was served as a kind of lift shaft as well. Lovely modernist clock tower, and it's in a book by Historic England called The Making of Coventry, The Making of a Modern City, and it's by Jeremy and Caroline Gould. Yeah, and this book's been my Bible kind of the past kind of 4 years, and it's just a really it's a really clear and just well thought out and fine study of all the achievements that were made in the post-war rebuild of Coventry. It's not kind of over the top. It's just a really interesting and thoughtful study of the place. I mean, I just read something just when I was preparing for this, that the city council kind of sanctioned the book as well, but I can't believe they've read it with all the things that are planned and all the things they're getting rid of. Yeah, I just really would love the council and the developers to take a good look at this book and see what they're ruining. Anyway, I've got to mention City Arcade and Shelton Square, because these are the two places that are doomed under this redevelopment scheme. They've certainly deteriorated over the years, but that's just because they've just kind of been left, and you know, they could have had a bit of investment and TLC and survived and been appreciated. If you take a look at some photos, and apologies I haven't got them here, but there's a great blog spot called Between Channels, and it's got some really great photos of Coventry in 1968. And there's particularly a couple of the City Arcade. And if you look at that, you can just see the care and attention that was put into this arcade. That's almost like a kind of modernist version of Victorian shopping arcade, with all really beautiful uniform modernist signage. It's just lovely. Right, so on to a sketch for a proposed print. So here it's the roof of the market with Coventry Point in the background, a view that you can't see anymore. And I'm really, you know, basically what I was thinking here, it's hard, I suppose it's hard for you to tell, but I was trying to merge the blue barriers that you can see on the market directly into the sky, and so they only appear just when they're in front of Coventry Point, and then your eyes put in the rest. It's kind of quite fitting that I've usually tended to shy away from using blue. So generally, a lot of my prints, you know, if I've used blue once, I'll try and use like another colour, and tend to always, you know, keep away from blue skies, or at least, you know, mainly keep away from them. But with Coventry, it's not just because of the sky blue football team. It's just that the blue has seemed to suit every single time I've printed. Like I said, I always make an effort not to use blue, but this time I've just kind of been forced to when I'm designing the prints. It might be, you know, maybe it's a symbolic of the horrible term blue sky thinking, but the kind of blue sky thinking that was there when that term didn't exist, but when they were actually doing all this post-war redevelopment. There is one thing I've admired about the Year of Culture branding, Coventry 2021, and that is the kind of new logo that they've got, and the interactive logo, and their use of blue and grey. I think they've got the blue just absolutely spot on for that. Anyway, so hopefully you'll be seeing this print next year. I'll pull my finger out. Right, so we're running up from the market and past the remains of Coventry Point and past what was British Home Stores on the right, and up to the intersection of Smithard Way and the Precinct. So yeah, looking up to the Precinct with our view on the left is this kind of particular view that Donald Gibson had in mind. He always wanted to create these access points and strong views. Now, I've put this photo in because it's got the lovely canopies that have recently been removed. It's a bit dramatic, a bit melodramatic, I suppose, but I just think it's almost vandalism that they've removed these canopies that were an integral part to the building and to the vision, and it's lost all the lovely lettering as well. At least you can see the hideous green escalator in the background. At least that's gone. That's about the one good thing so far about the redevelopment. Anyway, moving on to a print. So I use, if you can look at the top half of this print, I use this view looking up with M&S on your left and the Leofric Hotel on your left too, and Broadgate House on your right. I use this as a basis for a commission from Faber and Faber to illustrate a Simon Armitage poem. Now the poem is called A Vision, and the poem was about post-war plans for new towns and cities and basically a new way of life. It starts with the line, "The future was a beautiful place once." But it's basically about how they kind of largely seem to have failed. And obviously that could apply to many people's thoughts on Coventry with its demise in the late 70s and 80s. I mean, one thing I always remember is that if when I was at college and when I first moved to London, if I ever told anyone I was sporting in Coventry, the general reaction would be, "God, what a shithole." And that was, I suppose, something that kind of that just got soaked into you. At the time, I thought it was pretty harsh when people said it, because when you're brought up, just seems normal to yourself. But yeah, it definitely, not just from the people in Coventry, but it definitely had a bad reputation throughout. And hopefully over the years that has changed. Anyway, this was actually the first use of Coventry in a print, because this was way back in 2013, and I lost the spire from the top half of this view of Coventry because I wanted it to just represent a generic kind of new town. The keen-eyed amongst you might be able to spot elements in the bottom left of the Brunswick Centre and the Mersey Shopping Centre in Stockport on the bottom right. Right, and here is how it was printed. So if a poem is illustrated and it's printed, it's apparently called a broadside. And apparently these were things that were popular in Victorian times. And there you can see why it had that kind of irregular white space and light tones in the middle, because it had to have a poem printed on it. When Faber and Faber produced these, they produced these as quite nicely produced prints. But they only got the poets to sign them and not the illustrators. I don't know what's that saying about the illustrators, but I can't argue Simon Armitage is definitely far more well known than me and deserves to be signed by him. But I thought they could have let the illustrators sign them too. I'm aiming to use the kind of main elements of this on a new print and use the before mentioned Phoenix sculpture as a central piece, so obviously without the text, and keep the top half possibly the same, and then incorporate maybe the Godiva Cafe or the Locarno dance hall, which is now the library. That's again, one for the future, and hopefully you'll see next year. With regards to Godiva Cafe, I really wish they would take off the conservatory roof that was placed over that whole area of the precinct. Obviously it's supposed to make it weatherproof, but it just was completely out of sorts with the lovely modernist design of that whole area. Again, I haven't got a photo here, but you can see the original photos of the Godiva Cafe if you just Google it online. Right, so we're on another little quick diversion from Coventry. But the inspiration is definitely there, and it's kind of like a follow-on from the Simon Armitage poem, because this is a print that was commissioned by a book produced by Reba and the Town and Country and Planning Association. It's a book called New Towns: The Rise, Fall and Rebirth. So I thought it was very apt to me, and I know that during the building of Stevenage and Harlow and things like that, then people, architects and planners, visited Coventry and took elements of that into their plans for these new towns. So this actual print, I was asked to incorporate Victor Passmore's Apollo Pavilion at Peterlee, and also Henry Moore's Harlow Family Group. So for anyone who says, I know the family group aren't at Peterlee, they asked me to introduce both elements. And for those of you who are interested in a technique way, if you look at the figures, obviously it's trying to get a stone effect with linocut. That wasn't done, it was done partly with a bit of sandpaper, but also just kind of a liberal use of a small roller and quite thin ink, and just inked up quite liberally, almost like using a kind of paintbrush onto the lino. And here's the actual cover itself. It's a really beautifully produced book, and again, this is one of those things that it was due to be launched. I think the launch of it event was pretty much the first week of our lockdown, so yet another thing that sadly got postponed, and obviously was very upsetting for all concerned. But I'm definitely looking forward to having a good read of this book. I haven't had time as yet. Maybe if there is another lockdown, but if the kids actually are still at school. Right, so back to Coventry. So we're kind of marching up to Broadgate, and there's definitely a lot to keep me here, to keep me busy here again. But you know, again, I'm kind of pining for the old days when the store that is now Primark was Owen, and it used to have I don't quite know exactly what they've done, but the original detailing on the front window, I think they call it a curtain wall, has changed, and it's for the worse, but it's still a magnificent building, I think. And also, I kind of pine for the days when Broadgate basically had a park in the middle, albeit it did have traffic going around it. I think it's a good thing it's pedestrianised, but it had a park in the middle, and Godiva, I think, was facing a different way. Also in Broadgate, which may form a future print, was the wonderfully bizarre Lady Godiva and Peeping Tom clock that they come out on the hour and do a little kind of follow round on this little track. And also elements of the Leah Frick Hotel, which you can just see to the left of Primark here, which in its day sounded like an amazing hotel. I think it was one of the very first hotels where they had televisions in the rooms. And also, I just read recently that it was the most fully booked hotel outside of London back in its day. We'll give the Cathedral Lane shopping centre that you can just see on the right a miss, though, I think. Right, yes, another very quick diversion. So apologies for this, but the whole area of Broadgate, and I think particularly Owen, which I was mentioning about, particularly Owen and frontage, is reminiscent of what's now termed the Festival of Britain style. So here's a print of mine called Festival 2 of the Royal Festival Hall, and this place always takes me back to Coventry, because I think just the detailing inside and out is just very reminiscent of that whole area of the original Donald Gibson development and architectural style of Coventry. And funnily enough, it's Owen and Owen, the storefront reminds me more of the Festival Hall even than the Belgrade Theatre, which is another place that may be a future print. But there's just something about the original kind of frontage that reminded me of the Festival Hall. Right, so back to Coventry, and we've passed over Broadgate and cut across towards a cathedral. And the one thing that most people know about Coventry, obviously, is the cathedral, and so I won't drone on and on about this because there's been so much written and said about it. But the interior is as striking and impressive as the exterior thing, and obviously it's got lots of public art sculptures and tapestries by James Sutherland and windows by John Piper in there. So just some amazing, it's like a gallery in itself. But anyway, these are my tracing paper sketches for an ongoing print. And here's a colour study for a print in progress. I was drawn to the view of the bombed out area of the old cathedral, with the canopy of the new cathedral kind of coming over, almost like it's protecting that bombed out shell. So yeah, hence my choice of this. And so yes, this is another gouache study in preparation for a lino. And since returning numerous times and reading up about Coventry, I've been quite moved and quite proud of the kind of the motto and spirit of peace and reconciliation that all came from really the cathedral, I suppose, as well as a rebuilding. And you know, the city and the cathedral forged many ties with other damaged, war-torn cities in Europe. I think it's another reason why Coventry should be, you know, proud of its kind of rebuilding and its modernist heritage, and it should be kind of held up as an example to other places in these times about how a place can be rebuilt, not just architecturally, but with a sense of hope and forgiveness. It's certainly something that wasn't drummed into me, my brothers, when we were youngsters, when we set about recreating World War II with our plastic airfix soldiers. But, you know, maybe I didn't listen, I don't know, but maybe it was too soon after the event, and so it wasn't taught. But I just wish that as part of our education, we'd been told more about the city we lived in and how important it was and how it was trying to you know, make a more positive beginning. Right, so back to the process. So I've done my colour rough, I've done all my original little sketch drawings, and one of the things I do when preparing a print is that I do a master print. And so this gets drawn up to scale, the same scale as a lino, and everything thereafter kind of comes from this master drawing. So I use this master piece of tracing paper to trace onto the actual bits of lino, and I also use it for my registration plate, which is a hard thing to describe again virtually, but it's something that's used in the printmaking process. But I've got a photo of one a little bit later on in a print of the elephant, and so maybe that will be a bit clearer so I can describe it then. Yeah, and when I'm doing the printing process, it's such a long-winded process that you're always slowly refining things along the way. I mean, here you can see I've added a little bit to the right-hand side and cropped a little bit on the left. So if you just jump, it looked a bit squeezed there, a little bit condensed, so I've stretched it out a bit. And you know, things like that make a massive difference to me. It might not to you, but to me it does. Here's a piece of the actual lino, and this is the lino for the main kind of walled areas. And as you can tell, that's still being carved. You might be able to tell from the cut marks how small the tool that I use is and how time consuming this is. But yeah, that's the lino piece. And here is another lino piece, and this is the lino for the sky. So again, this print is in process and it shall be done. And I'll hope to revisit the cathedral again for subject matter, possibly to do a kind of semi-abstract print that incorporates, you know, some of the John Piper windows and some of the Epstein sculptures, and maybe a bit of the Graham Sutherland tapestry. Right, so after the cathedral, we cut down Priory Street and we take a little sharp right, and we come down to what would be the kind of back of the now sadly closed central baths, which will certainly be subject matter for a future print. Again, it's got like a real strong attachment for me here. It's where I learned to swim. It's where we went swimming with the school. I remember cups of Bovril and fish and chips with the family afterwards. There's a really beautiful architect's perspective visual by somebody called James C. Brown in the book I mentioned by Jeremy and Caroline Gould, The Making of a Modern City. It's just a beautiful, you know, architectural painting that really got the atmosphere of what the place would be like. There's also some really good, lovely archive photos from the Coventry Observer online, taken just after it was finished, and it shows how this area had like a sunbathing deck, and it was kind of a garden landscaped area, and people sunbathed on this area, which would be right at the bottom of this photo now. And it's, you know, it's just being left in and turned into a kind of bit of an overgrown no man's land, you know, overgrown and unattended. And yeah, it's so sad that this place has closed. I'm just going to bore you with a quote from Coventry New Architecture from 1969. And it said, "Coventry has been provided with one of the finest swimming pools in the world. It probably has no equal in Europe, and local pride has reason to be satisfied." I mean, I know 1969 is in the past, but it's not that far in the past, and this place just should not be closed. It should be something that they should have found a way to develop it with new amenities and enhance more what was good about it. Yes, so to the right of the baths, and actually attached to the baths, is the iconic Elephant Sports Centre. Also deceased as a sporting place, I believe now, and I think it was in, you know, at least under threat of being got rid of. I've heard that there's plans and ideas to keep it, maybe as a kind of cultural centre or as a music venue, which would be great. But yeah, I mean, you know, these two places next to each other are just fantastic, and to think of them both empty is just really sad. I love the shapes in this video, but to translate this in this photo, but to translate this into a print would just be a bit too bonkers. So I'm keeping this bit as a photo. Right, so down to the Elephant. For those of you who don't know, so the Elephant was built, I think, in 1977. It was an extension to the baths, and I think it just became, I think it was supposed to represent the Elephant, and it became affectionately known as the Elephant by locals rather than the Fairfax Sports Centre, which doesn't have such a ring to it. Yeah, so here's my starting point as a sketch, and the shaped elephant kind of got me rather carried away, because sometimes it's kind of exciting doing a print to take the elements and exaggerate them and turn it into a bit of a semi-abstract form and into a semi-abstract image, in a way to kind of enhance the image, and also just for a way sometimes for the viewer to try and find the image when you've done the print. And here is a follow-on colour study from that drawing. And there's some aspects of it that I like, but I think I definitely got carried away. And it was a bit like using a kind of digital technique tool and not knowing when to stop. So you're kind of seeing something that most people wouldn't usually see here. I'm showing something that I don't really want people to see. And the final nail in the coffin was when I realised it reminded me of Elmer the Elephant from my own kids' children's books. So I moved back to representing it how it actually is. So this is a small print of the elephant that kind of done as its own edition as well as a test print. And I think another thing is the fact that I feel now that I'm almost recording post-war Coventry before it's gone and before it's stripped bare, rather than celebrating it. So it means that I'm kind of drawn more to doing representational prints rather than kind of semi-abstract designs. Yeah, I've just realised I'm looking a bit dark in the background there, so I'm going to turn this light on. Not that you want to see me, you want to see the prints. Right, so here's the finished larger print, and it's going to be called Elephant Blue. which I'm quite pleased with the simplicity of this, because I was going to have a tendency to get carried away with this one, and I needed to draw it all back. There might be a few tiny additions to this, a few little minor highlights, but this is pretty much it. So I just, I've only ever heard endearing comments about this. It's a bit of a behemoth of a building, but yeah, anyone that knows it, they have a real affection for it. So I really hope it gets a good future use. Here, going back to the process a bit, is a photo from the workshop, the studio where I do the prints. And you can see the roller, double-handed roller, and you can see a big splodge of grey ink. And that funny grey shaped thing there is actually the last bit of lino that formed the dark areas at the bottom of this print. So yeah, that just kind of shows how the process is done. And here is that same piece of lino, and that shows the registration card that I mentioned earlier. So basically, the registration card is the image drawn in reverse, in mirror image, and the lino is placed on top of it. So I draw out the whole image, and the lino is placed on top of it, and then the paper is laid on top of that. And then when it feeds through the press, you get the print. But it means that if you do it really carefully, you can get these separate bits of lino to work as a jigsaw, and it means that all the things will join up on the finished print. Sometimes I reuse the registration plates, and for the very keen-eyed of you, you might be able to see that I use this registration plate for Coventry Station, and you can just see the kind of concrete slab jutting out of the elephant's head on here. I quite like that as a bit of a ghostly image. I'm almost trying to think of something to do with it, but again, that's probably me getting carried away. Right, just over from the elephant, just over the road, is the main or the most viewable bit of the infamous Ring Road in Coventry. Again, just something that I think I've taken for granted, but I've kind of come to love. Probably more from being a printmaker and an illustrator stroke artist, because of the dramatic shapes and angles you get, and the light and dark areas it gives. So it always gives you something to work with. And yeah, I'm going to finish on this print. Fittingly, it's the most recent one, and also fittingly, it's a project I did with Eames Fine Art Gallery, who are the gallery where I'm going to have the Coventry show, the show that got postponed. And it's the print was a response to lockdown. Basically, the artists at the gallery were teamed with a group of writers called 26, and between us we had to come up with something called a common place. And it was a place that we kind of either found solace in, or daydreamed about during lockdown, or wanted to visit, or thought of, kept you going. And funnily enough, both me and my partner, the guy I was teamed with, Ollie Davies, writer, we came up with Hackney Marshes. Me, because I was taking the kids there as a break from the horrors of homeschooling during lockdown. But there was something about Hackney Marshes, the Walthamstow Marshes, that reminded me of Coventry. I think it was the kind of, because it's those semi-industrial areas in between the outskirts of the city with flyovers in the background, but also quite peaceful, and a sense of nature trying to reclaim these areas of concrete. So, and also, it made me, obviously taking the kids out in a time like that, it made me think of when I was their age. So I was constantly thinking of Coventry at the time, so I merged the two. So this print is a merge of the two, and yeah, it kind of sums up my nostalgic thoughts of the place, and yeah, I think what it also reminded me of is that I know in my research I've done, and through that wonderful book, I've realised that a lot of thought was put into the landscaping in between, underneath the ring roads and the pedestrianised passageways through the ring roads, and there was fountains put in there and detail and decoration, and all that kind of got lost in the 80s and 90s when there was no love or money for those kind of areas. So it was a bit of a kind of a homage to that as well, the kind of landscaping ideals that went into it that sadly got lost. And yeah, there you go. I'm pretty much done.
Lovely. Thank you very much indeed, Paul. That's great. I really enjoyed that. And lovely to see some of the new images. I don't know if anyone wants to post any questions on chat. Lots of people have been saying all sorts of things. All sorts of very positive things, but comments and conversations rather than actually asking you questions, which I think it means you must have been incredibly lucid and thorough.
Right. That sounds
good. Yeah, I hadn't realised that you ever did that sort of scratching at the surface of the lino, like you were showing with the sandpaper. Is that something you've done before, or is that kind of in response to the Bill Mitchell concrete?
It is something I've done before, but I just do it occasionally. I think, you know, doing printmaking, you would go through phases, and sometimes it's all about texture and sometimes it's about super flat areas, and I go between the two. But I've done it before, but I also used to do this other thing where you'd actually etch the lino itself with caustic soda. So you burn the lino with caustic soda, but it was a bit tricky to do, and haphazard results. And I found on the larger prints, so the scale of that William Mitchell print is pretty big, and on the larger prints the sandpaper works, you know, really works for it. I suppose it's just one of those things as well. You don't want to, you know, once you've done it, you don't want to keep using it all the time. It'll be like a dog with a bone. So when it suits, I do it.
Yeah, suits. Awesome. And there's a question from Joe saying, why is it that you avoid blue? Is it a practical issue with ink quality, or does it make everything look much too like California?
That's a good question. Well, like I said, I try to avoid blue, just nothing to do with technicalities of the print or anything like that, purely because I suppose when I was producing architectural prints, it just seemed too obvious to use blue. Too much like a print, too much like a picture, you know. So, and I've always liked kind of strong colours like lime greens and magentas and pinks. Mm-hmm. And so it was just trying to turn the prints into something else. So I have used blue in the past, but I've always tried to not. But this time, every print of Coventry so far has blue. And if it needs it, it will have it.
It gets it, yeah. Yeah. Great. Good. So, and several people asking how they can get hold of your prints. And I know you were offering people listening tonight a special offer.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes, it's right. Yes.
Yes.
I think
so can you explain that?
I will. There's a 15% discount on all my prints on my website that have a price next to them. If they don't have a price and it says inquire, that really kind of means I've only got one print left. So, but all the others that have an actual price, there's 15% off until the end of September. And they just have to email me through the website at info@paulcatherall.com. And hopefully, if I get my tech expert onto it, I'll be able to work out how to do coupons and they can order through the website and it's nice and easy. If they can't, we shall sort out a way to do it anyway. This is just a payment issue. So, you know, we'll sort it out. They'll get 15% off however we do it.
Lovely. Well, thank you very much for that. That's great. And the other thing we should say, and I'd hoped, is that Paul has designed for 20th Century Society a fantastic big canvas tote bag, shopping bag, which is about to go into production. And I was hoping we'd have a picture of it here, but I don't think we have we?
I don't think so. I have.
No, anyway, coming shortly. It'll be in the e-newsletter that we send out to members and non-members, and we will be we'll be selling those really soon. And it's great. It's got lots of a Southbank Centre image with lots and lots of that very strong magenta colour on a black background. Looks it's come out really well, I think.
Yeah, it's the national. I entitled the print Southbank Magenta. It's actually it's the National Theatre, which is
That's
on,
true.
but yeah, it's the National Theatre.
Yes.
And yes, and I'm very fond of the print, and
Yeah.
it looks like it will work really nicely. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing it and
Great.
using it.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Well, thank you very much for doing that. We wanted to have some, really nice, well-designed product. So I've been holding off doing a bag for ages because I didn't feel we had something kind of interesting enough to put on it, and that's great.
Great, I'm honoured.
Okay, thank you. I mean, thank you again. As we leave, I really just want to say thank you everyone for tuning in. If you aren't a member of 20th Century Society, please join us. And if you could consider making a donation after watching the talk, it would be fabulous, because all the money will go towards our casework. And as tonight's lecture has shown all too vividly, we still need to do a huge amount more to protect post-war architecture in particular. Coventry is in a real state at the moment, and I do think it's, we've done quite a lot of advocacy already. There's plenty more we could do. We were very much hoping we'd be able to do some tours, but obviously lockdowns prevented that. There are a large number of buildings in Coventry very much at risk of demolition at the moment, and we really need to up the pressure on the council to be just much more appreciative and realise what a fantastic opportunity they represent. The one bit of good news we've had recently is, I understand that having not had a conservation officer for quite a while, they have just advertised for one. So anyone out there who's really keen and suitably qualified, it would be an amazing job. Although I think you might have an uphill struggle making your arguments with the boss. But anyway, I hope that is a really good sign. And thank you again, and we'll see you all next week, I hope. Okay, good night.
Thank you. Thank you.